Welcome back, everybody, to DissedMedia, a startup story, the podcast where we take you behind the scenes of starting a business from the ground up. And today, we are going to be getting into that topic exactly. This is something I think every manager, leader, entrepreneur is going to enjoy listening to, because today's guest is not just talking about growth. We're actually talking about building businesses that give your life back to you. Most businesses grow in revenue, but they also grow in complexity as they grow in revenue as well. And oftentimes what this does is it puts more pressure on those leading the business. There are more decisions that need to be made, and just really more of everything flowing through a few people who are kind of the founders of those businesses and those people who are at the top. And so what we sometimes start out thinking is going to be freedom, right? Having our own business, running our own thing, ultimately starts turning into a job and something that we can't really step away from. So our guest today is going to help us understand a little bit more of how to get things back into control. He himself has scaled up a business, Solo Pack Packaging Solutions, where he grew that company into an 8-figure business. Before exiting, there's a few lessons he took away from himself and is now founder of the entrepreneur Sherpa, where he helps to allow others to discover freedoms in themselves. He is also author of Built for Freedom, where he lays out this system for building companies that don't rely solely on the founder, but rather leveraging the power of those within the organization. He is vice chair of the Montreal Economic Institute and is a member of the Forbes Business Council. I'd like to welcome today to the show, Mr. David Salerno. David, how are you?
I'm doing good, Ben. Thank you so much for having me on your show. And I'm feeling older every time you would read the next bit of the description.
Well,
I felt older and older. Yeah, no, I'm pretty happy with them. It's just that once they're lined up like this, I'm like, and a few scars too on the way during the description. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, thank you for taking some of your time and sharing some of your wisdom with us. One of the things I always like to start off with is let people know a little bit about your background. We touched on a couple of your accomplishments along the way, but if you don't mind, maybe sharing a little bit of kind of what you've done that leads you to what you're doing today.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny because the first thing that popped to mind was when I was young, my father started all kinds of businesses. So I knew that I would be one day an entrepreneur. And that was kind of the thing. And then I had the chance to become a franchisee for student painters. So when you're a student, you have a franchise and you start this. So that was kind of what set me up. Then I fell in the corporate world and eventually decided, okay, if I'm not doing it now, I'm never going to do this. So then I jumped into starting a business and all that jazz. So I guess at heart, I was an entrepreneur and figured out a way to survive. It's tough to start your own business and make it happen and then scale. So I guess I'd say at the heart, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm passionate for freedom. That's why I started the business. That's why I'm part of the MEI. It's all about prosperity and freedom. So, yeah, I guess we'll discover that in the hour that follows.
Yeah, well, and you scaled a business quite sizably, I would say. When you started out, did it start from zero, or did you have a little traction as you were getting into it, and then at what point did it really just kind of become to the point it was where you exited?
Yeah, it wasn't always it wasn't the plan, that's for sure. I didn't think I'd get to that level. Started from zero. My first year, I think I did $80,000 of sales on year one, launching a new product line. So you can imagine when you have 30% margin, that's not much money at the end of the year once you paid for everything. But yeah, I started from scratch, and I feel like an iguana who I had to shed my skin a few times over those 20 years because you realize it's a different mindset each level. 1 million a year, maybe 8 or 9 team players was kind of my sweet spot. This is what I'm going to accomplish starting in 2005. And that was kind of where I thought I'd get. And then I got at least 10 times bigger.
So, as you were growing, and I think this is something that a lot of business owners will sometimes struggle with. We talk about, when you start a business, you think there's going to be some freedom associated with it. But then as you grow, that isn't necessarily the case. Oftentimes, entrepreneurs find themselves running 7 days a week. Even if it's not full time every day, you're always kind of one foot in the business. So when did you realize that the growth that you guys were experiencing wasn't necessarily giving you the freedom that you thought it would?
That's a great question. It's probably like at year three where starting to really make inroads in terms of growth and starting to be able to hire more people. And then I think that the first wall you hit is you start your own business because you have an idea. You want to do it your way. Maybe you're in the corporate world. Maybe you were doing something else and you thought, I think I can do this better, whatever it is, right? And then you have to start hiring, and then all of a sudden you realize, okay, now I'm gonna have to pass that idea, have that vision, and give it to people. And I'm a humanist, so I was like, okay, this is gonna be great. But then you start hitting the wall where, oh wait, it's not done the way I think it should be done. So, and that's where I think a lot of entrepreneurs, and if you have budding entrepreneurs in your audience, that's where they hit a wall where they're like, okay, it's almost more painful now because I'm kind of trapped because I got to make sure everybody's online, everybody's aligned, we're serving our clients right. And then it feels like it's more work than when you were a solopreneur or even in the corporate world.
So how was that learning to delegate? Because I think that's a big part of, kind of discovering some of your freedom, right? And when you grow something,
Yeah.
you're like it's your baby, right? So how do you how did you find that process of beginning to delegate some of those responsibilities to others?
Yeah. So I think, well, first I was blessed to have been in management for a few years before that. So I kind of was able in a larger structure to understand that okay, you have a team and roles and responsibilities, so it's okay to delegate, find the right people. But I think what happened is I went through a phase where I don't remember where I saw that saying, but it was make sure you delegate but do not abdicate. So that was the first mantra that really helped me because it was the distinction between delegating and saying here, take this thing, you take care of clients and orders example, and that's it, just go. But sometimes it's a form of abdication because then they do it the way they think if you haven't set up processes and whatnot. And the second one was trust but verify, meaning you have to trust your people. So I would trust my people, but the trust but verify was the second mantra that worked for me because I'd be like, okay, this is how we're gonna do, I don't know, the way we process orders and take care of our clients and follow-ups. But I would always double check, how are we doing? Are we doing it the way the vision was set and whatnot? So those two mantras really helped me become better at delegating.
Yeah, I like the trust but verify. That is definitely one of my favorites as well. Um, as you think about that process of moving things outward to others, going through that verify process, was there a point where you kind of felt like you were starting to become the bottleneck in the process?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It it was a classic case where I'd have, let's say we were five in the team, and then somebody on the team would say, "Hey, we have this peculiar situation. So we have equipment, trays, film. There's components. There's a bit of science in what we do." And they'd come back to me and say, "Hey, we've got this client, and he's been trying to seal his trays with the equipment for food packaging, and we have this issue. Like, what should we do? Should we do this type of film or that type of film?" And I'd be like, "You know what? I'm not quite sure. Let me get back to you." Now, the let me get back to you is at some point it would pile up on my desk. But we have a client that's really waiting and needing answers like tomorrow, yesterday, maybe even, because they're producing food. They have their own clients. So that's when I realized we needed to map out all these questions so that they didn't depend on me and getting back to my team members. I think that's when I realized, okay, I can't. They can't all be in my head, and it can't be all them waiting for me. They gotta have their own source of truth, if you will, in the business, so that they never have to go via me for these specialized knowledge or even processes.
So, out of curiosity, how big did the organization get? Like, how many people did you start with? What did it scale up to?
Yeah, so solopreneur at zero, doing everything, growing slowly. And now we're 20 years later, we're 17, 18 full time, a few part-timers here and there or seasonal. Plus we use a lot of outsourced resources. So right now, I'd say under 20.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's still a manageable number, but a lot of things that are still going on.
Correct. It was actually my pride whenever I'd have, you participate to business groups and I have fellow entrepreneurs who would be very proud. I'm like, I have 20 employees, I have 30 employees, and they're growing, and that was their thing. I feel like I was obsessed with going the other way. Like, how much growth per team member can I generate? Can the team generate so that we don't end up in boom and bust cycles? Over 20 years, we did have our moments of shock, whether it's because of the foreign exchange rate, because of cycles in the economy. So I'm very proud that we built that business, eight figure with under 20 people.
Yeah, this is one of the things I think about is those management cadences you have, the
Mm.
routines and the processes that you get into. Was there any sort of processes that you came across that you found really kind of help the team stay connected? So that the communication and everything kind of stayed alive.
Yeah. It's funny because I, in the corporate world, had so many meetings, and sometimes you'd have to be like 10 minutes late to a meeting because you needed to be on the other one, but then run from one room to the next. That was so ridiculous. And we'd all be scrambling, like we'd be 12 people, meetings and meetings. But long story short, I was not a fan of meetings. So when I started the business, I was like, you know what? We're not going to be like buried under meetings. Anyways, we're four or five. And then I realized that a weekly operational, or we call it lebdo because we operate in French sometimes. We do bilingual, but lebdo, so the weekly. And I was like, you know what? We're going to make it that's the meeting that we're all going to meet. We're all going to put what we need on the table, whether blockages or issues and whatnot. And it's a structured one. And we've evolved the recipe, but that was so key because then the rest of the week we eliminated most of the discussions that needed to happen in that room once a week. And people know if there's anything else happening during the week, they can bring it up anyways the week after. So that weekly meeting, very structured, I think is key in any business, especially small business.
I want to take a little bit of a step back because something I think that we probably didn't explain to the listening audience is the business itself. Do you mind giving a little bit
Mm,
of detail about that
sure.
business that you scaled up there?
Sure, absolutely. It's funny because before I go into details, I have a buddy of mine who's a consultant in organizational development in HR, if you will, and he had told me, he said, you know, Dave, I think you're going to be successful, and that was years ago, because it doesn't really matter what the industry you're in. It's the way you look at your business. It's like the business is your product. It's my obsession was running a good business. It didn't matter really what field. I wasn't specialized in packaging, but I'll tell you about the business. It's funny. Your question triggered that flashback.
We got so into talking about the organization. It's like, oh yeah, what do you actually do?
Yeah, what is it that you do? All right, so Southpack Packaging Solution basically helps clients to improve their meal packaging and delivery system. So our clients will be Meals on Wheels, correctional services. We have retail points, and basically any caterer that will make a meal, package it in a pre-portion one portion meal, and deliver it, whether it's frozen, hot, refrigerated. We help them with the equipment, the trays, and the film to make a meal that's safe and compostable. Also, the tray itself is in pulp paper.
So this is uh, a lot of food service industry supplying then.
Absolutely, right on.
So when you talk about, want to jumping back into the business freedom aspect of it, how do you define that? How do you when you talk about business freedom, what does that look like to you?
Yeah, it's funny because it's I think the most controversial topic I've had with fellow entrepreneurs. I had a colleague in one of my business groups a few years ago. he would say, David, I don't get you. Like, I get it, but I don't get it. I didn't start a business not to work. So he was like almost offended with my business freedom promise. And we're friends, so we sometimes talk about this. And he just exited, actually, good for him. But that being said, for me, a business freedom was not that you're sitting by the pool drinking margarita, although that could be your prerogative. It was really more saying that you decide how you show up in your business. So you built it in a way that you're not the bottleneck, you're not trapped, your team is not depending on you, and the company is not depending on you to operate properly, but you basically decide how you show up. So in my case, once I kind of did that by year, I'm going to say 8 in the business, I realized, hey, I think I built something great, and I wanted to share that with my fellow entrepreneurs. So that's when I got into the Entrepreneur Sherpa project, writing the book. I was like, okay, how do I package this framework? What I did here. So that's how I decided to show up, and then later on scaled even more while I was doing that. Then I was like, you know what? I think I want to help uh, society at large via the group Montreal Economic Institute. It's a think tank that says that basically freedom for all brings prosperity to all. So business freedom to me is really to set up your business in a way that you decide how you show up in your business and outside of your business.
You touched on it there, the Sherpa method that you developed. If you wouldn't mind, like maybe an overview, not sure to the level of detail that you want to dive into it, but how about a little understanding of what the Sherpa method is and how it helped?
Sure. Yeah, I could talk for hours about this, but I will not do that here. So So the Sherpa method is a framework for founders, entrepreneurs, business owners that want to scale to a point, not necessarily in terms of money, but in terms of freedom, where they become basically not a must-have in the business. So what I ended up doing is I ended up reflecting what have I done in the business that got me to this point once it was kind of done, right? That I was like, oh, I don't need to show up. They don't need me in the office really. Actually, they'd rather not have me in the office, and we're thriving, we're growing double digits and the whole shebang. So the method Sherpa, why Sherpa? It's the idea that I was like, like a mountaineer. I've never gone up Everest or anything like this. Sometimes I get questioned by people who have, and now I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have chosen the word Sherpa because now I look like I'm some mountaineer or something. It's really the idea that you walk by the side of other mountain lovers, entrepreneurs, and I just have a few tools. I can help you carry your bags and bring you up that mountain with success, right? The framework itself is basically three main challenges any entrepreneur will face. First of all, is growth. If you don't grow enough, you're not going to be able to fund your own lifestyle if you're a solopreneur, or you won't be able to hire, or you won't be able to put the foundation to your business. So growth is like the first challenge you got to figure out to succeed, especially if you have a new product. The second one was sustainability. So you've got growth, you've got enough sales, at least to sustain you, your family, and maybe a team. The next one is that it has to be sustainable without you. So what do you put in place to have that challenge and be succeeding at that challenge of sustainability in the business? And the third challenge and the last one is really how to be of service. And really I bring service because I've always thought I'm building a business for obviously clients, obviously for me, the founder, um, um, to be able to be successful, but also for my people, the people in the team that are making it happen. So I've always seen how do you make your business to be at service of your clients, but of your partners, also of your people. And once you've mastered these three challenges, then you're pretty much set up that you have built a built for freedom business. And then each challenge come with steps and questions that you got to ask yourself. But that's the gist of the method.
So I imagine you've probably helped some other people discover this as well. When looking at that landscape of other people, because even myself, I've done some consulting work with some other businesses, and oftentimes I find myself observing other businesses and
Mm,
industries, and you kind of like, why do they do this? Why did they figure that's a good idea, or that's the best way of doing things? In either your own work in working with others or just things that you've observed, what are some of those mistakes that you think founders I don't. I hate to position it like oh, we're finding fault with everyone around us, but as you look at the landscape of founders and entrepreneurs around you, some of the things that are holding them back from scaling or kind of unlocking some of that freedom.
I feel it depends on at which season of entrepreneurship they are. Uh, I'm gonna say the because I've mentored people also. I was so I mentored a lot of entrepreneurs also, not necessarily with the Sherpa method, but just general
Yeah.
mentoring. And one thing I've noticed is many entrepreneurs, as they're growing and scaling their business, are not willing to do these changes in paradigms. So, example, you have maybe somebody who joined the team very early on, and they can do it all. They're your best fan. They're your right hand man, woman, and they can do it all. And you get to a point where the business grows, where you actually are needing, I'm going to say, specialists. You need a technician, somebody who's really more specialized in this, or HR. And all of a sudden, that person who kind of knows it all and can do it all because they're really talented, then there's a shift happening. How do you find the right role for that person? Because now you need specialists. So you don't want to hire just people that are talented in many different aspects. You need to start having specialists that are really good at what they do and probably know more than you, because you're probably multi-talented because you're an entrepreneur and you can do it all because that's what you start in business. So that paradigm shift, I think, is one of the hardest one. I've seen people stall and not realizing they need to shift gears on that one. I don't know if that's something you've witnessed on your end.
Yeah, one of the things that I've talked about before, I think it's kind of very important, is that a lot of times when we start out working, we get recognized, we get noticed, we often get promoted because of our tactical abilities, like what we know how to get done. And we become very successful at getting things done. And so somebody says, hey, you're good at that. We should give you more responsibility. But at some point, as you're making your way up into an organization, you have to move from being a tactical person to being a strategic person. And
Yes.
there's sometimes, depending upon the person and what they're comfortable doing, that's a little bit of a hard separation to make, because the people who love the tactical always want to do, they always want to jump in, they always want to lend a hand, they always want to take it over, they always want to do it and run it, and you can't be both, especially as the business scales, as there are more strategic needs in the business. You can't always be the tactical guy. And there's this old saying I love. It's what got you here won't get you there.
You know what? It's funny because in what you just mentioned, stepping away, I think is key. I remember an entrepreneur that I was mentoring, and she had like an inventory problem. It just didn't the inventory system and her actual physical inventory didn't match, and she would dive into those Excel sheets and try to figure out, and it was a nightmare for her. And as we would work through the issue, and then after a few questions, she'd realize she was the problem. She had to step away and just find a guy or a gal that would do it. And that's what she ended up doing. And lo and behold, she had somebody on the team who was like an Excel whiz kid. And she realized she was holding on to that thing because she had to, it's her business. She had to fix it. She stepped away, gave it to her team player, and within a weekend, you resolved it. And she couldn't believe that it had been 3 months. She was like obsessed, stressed about this. So stepping away, not to be the one in there, it's probably the best advice to give any founder and
I
entrepreneur.
will say, and I've run into this myself at times. I'm so curious about the problem. I so want to understand what the solution is that I don't give it away sooner to somebody who's probably going to solve it faster and just like get it done, move on. But there's something about me, like my own internal curiosity, my own desire to just kind of, I gotta know, like, why is it this
Yeah,
way?
yeah, you want to dig in.
And then I don't give it up. And unfortunately, I've got other things I need to move on to. But my own pride, if you will, kind of gets in the way of me allowing others to jump in and help out.
But you see that's where I feel the idea of business freedom as being you choose where and how you show in the business, you show up in the business. I, I think that's the beauty of the thing is that it becomes your prerogative whether you want to dive in into a very specific problem. Like for example, AI is talk of the town, Claude talk of the town, and I decided, you know what? For the team, we have processes, everything's chugging along, it's humming, it's a great team, everything. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna dive into this thing. And I deep dove that if I'd been in charge of so many things tactically, I would have been a bottleneck for so many processes, but I wasn't. And I decided I deep dove, and now we decided to start a strategic project where we're going to implement this throughout the company. So I think it's okay, and that's our prerogative as business owners, as long as you've set the machine up so that you're not the bottleneck anywhere in the business. It's okay then to deep dive, right?
Yeah, I agree. There's for me this. I'm very much a doer. I'm very much a self-serving person. So I I, I don't like to wait on. It's terrible about me. I don't like to wait on others. I
Yeah.
like to kind of move at my own speed, and so just give me all the keys, all the access, and I'll figure it out. And I promise I won't destroy anything. It's kind of the way I approach a lot of stuff. But there is that shift you have to make from being a doer to building a
Mm,
team that can ultimately operate when you're not around. And
yeah.
that I think can be a challenge.
No, I can. And maybe it's okay for some entrepreneurs to remain the main doer if you want in the business, especially if it's something that's really peculiar and very specialized. Somebody I don't know making furniture and it's their art, it's their design. So they'll have the support team, but that's their thing. I think that could be okay if the systems are put in place. But if you're suffering and frustrated because you feel trapped in the doing, definitely it's time to put in place what's needed for you not to feel trapped anymore.
Well, my career background has always been in kind of sales and marketing operations. I've always kind of sat on the supply chain side of the business, and
Mm,
uh, for me, what I've kind of come to realize in doing that kind of work, I call it the four core, four fundamental things that have to occur in business for things to run smoothly. Trust and communication, two of the most
mm,
important things, because if you don't have trust, the system doesn't work, and you got to openly communicate. But then processes and routines, and that's all about kind of building systems that work. And I notice that you also kind of lean into systems and building systems that enable people to get work done. So help me walk me through that a little bit of, what are some of those systems that you put together and, kind of stress value on?
yes, a great point. So in the context of the Sherpa method, the sustainability part has three main components, and one of them is systems. Literally, it's like your numbers, your systems, your people. And for me, systems um, in the type of business of distribution, integration, technical support was basically mapping out how do we handle a specific routine. I love the term. And we realized as we were scaling, we were onboarding a lot of clients. We have more than 600, 650 clients, plus the one off that we'll order just once that are not on the ecosystem. And I realized onboarding clients was such a key thing for so many different reasons because we had equipment, training, we have multiple people that we have to deal with the client. So onboarding client was one of the top first processes that we actually mapped out because we wanted to make sure that that client, from the moment he says yes, sign the quote, we were going to take care of this client in a way that he would be loyal for life, but also would be set up that he would be referring us happy. So onboarding to me was one of the top process that we had decided to put in place. after, how do we treat an order so we don't make mistakes and we ship the product same day? Because that was another one. So I think in the systems, it was really like for your audience, look at what takes the most time, or maybe what has the most mistakes or frustrations, because that's how we started. What would generate the most frustrations in everything you do on a weekly basis in your business, and just design a system around that, get that resolved. Because usually the owner gets involved when there are problems, so that could be the first system you put in place. Go frustration by frustration, basically.
So when you were scaling up, what do you think were the things that helped you kind of break into that next level? Because I know, something I remember reading a while back is that, businesses will scale up to about 50, $70 million in revenue. And then there's this kind of sticking point where, they just successful year over year. But then at some point, you got to break, beyond that. You got to kind of, level up, if you will. What was that point where, or was there a point where things kind of plateaued for a bit? What do you think unlocked that moving up another level past that plateau?
Yeah, it's a great question. We definitely did hit a couple, two, three plateaus over 20 years for sure. What I think the first one is really a one of mindset for the business owner. It's very subtle, but if we're getting to levels of where it's starting to feel like uncomfortable, or like you're scared of heights, but it's kind of financial heights, right? Oh, okay. What if we lose that client that brings 1 million a year? Then you're like, oh, wait a minute, maybe that's getting too big for my comfort. So I think there's a mindset of the business owners for sure. So that I faced that, I'd say, a couple of times. And then once that is done and the ambition is there, and the decision to go no matter what, to the next level, then it's the realization that the type of client that you've been serving, you can continue to serve, but you might need to think differently about what client you're serving. So in our case, for example, we were serving clients that were bringing in maybe 15K a year, maybe, let's say it's a recurring business packaging, right? And then we had ambitious goals. We get to $1 million in sales, and we're like, okay, how are we growing? And I was, do the maths, and it's going to take a lot of 15,000 a year client to do 10 million, example. So we started, and there's a book actually called, I think it's called Bag That Elephant. It's a book from the 90s, I'm gonna say. And that book was very revealing. I was like, okay, we just need to figure out clients that we are the best fit for and the best solution, but that are consuming 200K a year. So you've got to start thinking differently about which clients can we serve. So we kept serving the same clients, but now we started to be more targeted onto which type of clients we go for. And that makes a difference. That makes a whole difference. So that mindset shift first, and then second, what kind of client can you go serve? Obviously, having systems that will support you in that scale up. That's where sometimes it goes bad, even if you grow.
Yeah. So the book that you put together, is it where at what point did you say, I've got to take all of this information, all of this ways of managing business and putting things together? When did you decide to put it all in a book?
I think it. Well, the anecdote is, I'm having our banker come and visit. The yearly visit. How's it going? Courtesy, this and that. And he's sitting and we're chit chatting, and it's almost an hour we're chit chatting. And at some point, my banker is like, David, I don't understand. Like, I've been sitting in your office, and it's an hour. Your door's open. Your phone hasn't rang. Nobody came to the door knocking, asking you how to do something. He's like, and he sees the numbers. He knows we're growing seriously, double digits and all. And he's like, so what's happening? I'm like, well, what do you mean? Isn't that how anybody runs a business? Like you organize your people, you have processes, and everybody knows what they're doing. And we have a meeting once a week to make sure, and people talk. And so it's like, no, David, like I rarely see this. So that's when I started getting the signal that maybe I'm doing something different. The second anecdote is one of our tech at the time. We had issue with a partner, and he was like, you know what? Maybe we should tell them how to do it the Salpak way. And I was like, but what is the Salpak way? And he was like, well, we have systems, we have this, we have that, and whatnot. And I realized, I'm like, when we have team members saying maybe we should help them a little bit in the way they're organized, that's when I'm like, okay, let me think about what we did here, and that's how the idea started. The final anecdote is I was in the shower, Ben, really, and I was
Where
thinking,
so many people do
my
their
best
best thinking, I'm
ideas,
telling you.
right? So I've got like glass panes, right? And there's fog,
You're
and I'm like,
drawn.
wait a minute. Yeah. And I'm like, what did I really do? I solved three problems because I like three of threes, the Trinity, maybe it's a Saint Trinity thing. And I'm like, well, first of all, I wasted too much time thinking of my business card and the way it looked and my logo and my website when I should have just been after clients and getting new clients as I go along. So I was like, growth was really the issue. And that's how I started doing the framework and the book and whatnot.
Yeah, I'm telling you, I think somebody needs to invent a dry erase board that you can put in the shower.
I love that. It would be a wet erase board this time.
Because I can't tell you that. Yeah, you drove it home. Have been there many times myself, where you're kind of like mapping things out, and you're like, oh yeah, that might work. But when you talk about systems and processes, which by the way, like this is one of the things I love. I mentioned
Hmm.
that processes and routines are kind of that other function of business, and the way I kind of define it is that processes are the things that enable everyone to know where something goes, right? So
Hmm.
as
I like
things
that.
come in, they have to have somewhere to go. And when you have bad processes, it's usually because you have a lot of things coming in and nobody knows where they go, right? So
Yeah.
so number one, we have to have that. And then the routines establish the predictability of information. So you
Hmm.
have your daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual, bits of information, and whether that's a meeting or a report or statistics or data, but there's got to be some predictability to things. So when you have good systems and you have good predictability, it creates calmness. It creates
Love that.
a way of getting things done. And I know for me, like I am always trying to build systems around the things that I've got going on, because I know once I have a system in place, it's out of my head. Like I don't have to worry about it. I don't take it to bed with me. I don't, you know, um, try and be with the
Ponder.
family while my
Yeah.
head is somewhere else. Like the moment I have a system in place, everything starts to feel better.
I love the way the way you present it and getting it out of your head, the predictability and the way I would see why the system helps is because it would answer questions ahead of time,
Yeah.
ahead of a situation presenting itself. Because um, I can be a control freak. I have to admit it. Sometimes I can be a control freak. My team would find it funny, but I can trust and I'll verify. But that being said, I realized putting a system in place would answer all these questions. What do we do with this? What do we do with that? The decision tree kind of format. And I thought that's what most team members, like most humans, just want to do good at what they do. And they just don't want to be stuck in between or have conflicting answers or variable answers. So the predictability, I think, is a great way to frame it. Uh, and then when it's not mapped, then you have the magic of human talent to just fill in the gaps when needed. But definitely predictability, I love
Yeah,
that.
well, it's funny something you said there. I've always been a big believer in that nobody wakes up and goes to work and thinks to themselves like, "How can I mess up today?" It's
Mm,
not something that people
absolutely.
desire to do. Nobody wants to mess up. Nobody's
Yeah.
trying to create issues or problems. But when problems and issues occur, and I'm very much about like, let's try and manage by exception, not by trying to wrangle every single thing that comes through the door, right? So have a
Exactly.
flow, have a process, have a place where things go. And then when something doesn't fit, like, let's take a look at it. And, another thing I'm very big on is there's no, like, when something does get messed up, we could sit here and talk about it for hours on end, but that's not going to solve anything. It's already done. Like the mess up has already occurred. So let's just figure out what happened. Let's correct it, and then let's just move forward because there admiring the problem isn't going to get anybody anywhere any faster. Right? All we're going to do is
Absolutely.
continually go about the same thing. Let's just acknowledge it, figure out what happened, put some processes in place to correct it, and then let's hope it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, no, it's a great framing. I think it's probably at the gist of why some entrepreneurs will resist at the idea of putting processes because and I know I've suffered from that. You're so scared you're gonna make a mistake, or you're gonna say, okay, let's do it that way, but you feel that sometimes there has to be a very, very customized call on a situation, and you're scared that if you put a system in place, we're gonna fail somehow, and it's gonna be a big problem. When at the end of the day, it's not gonna be that big. Rarely is it gonna be that big of a problem. So to your point, I agree with you. When you put in place a system, and if something didn't happen the way it was expected, or out of the box situation, let's see, can we? Is it a one-off? Then that's fine. It's happened as you said. If it's something recurring that we seem to be messing up, well, we'll just adapt the system. At least we're starting with a good baseline.
I think I think sometimes too when people are in charge, they they want to prevent mistakes. So one of the
Mm,
in owning something, and this is something I often talk about when I teach, is that as a manager we have to allow those around us to mess up. We have to let them, because that's how we learn. And I'm not saying that you create a minefield of things for people to, for things to go wrong, but at the same time, someone allowed us to mess up. Someone allowed us to
mm.
learn and get better through making mistakes. And we have to allow other people to make mistakes. And then, we can learn. And sometimes those mistakes will unveil something that we didn't think about, right? So it gives us an opportunity to think and learn. But, through that, just giving people the autonomy to error and coach and give feedback and get them better. I think that's part of the process. Unfortunately, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, managers, even business owners, they fear that
Mm.
because they want to have everything kind of in this very well manicured garden, right? They don't want to see any weeds.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting because you use the word coaching, and I'm a strong believer in coaching. From the corporate world, I was lucky to fall into a company that had great culture, a coaching culture, really. When I started my business was a bit different because now it's very personal. It's your family's future, right? So everything is amplified. So I remember we had a few years ago director of business development that joined the team, and I have Sicilian blood flowing in these veins, so sometimes I get very very feisty or reactive when I shouldn't really be. But hey, we have the personality we have, so it is what it is. But long story short, to your point about mistakes, I realized that the guy is brilliant. He's really brilliant. We're partners now, so he's amazing. And I realized that because I would do these little bouts, Sicilian like explosions, he was worried that he would make mistakes because he saw Salpak and he loved that what had been built, and he was almost a custodian of its growth. And so then at some point, I realized he would not take decisions that I think would have been reasonable to take. And at some point, I realized, okay, I think I froze the guy by being too reactive. So one day we have in the morning, we just have our morning sync. And I'm like, you know what, Michelle? I just want you to know that I find you're brilliant, you're smart. I think you get the Salpak vibe and DNA. And sometimes if I react like this, don't take it at full value. I trust you. Just go out there, and it's okay if you make mistakes that are not Salpak DNA approved. It's fine. Just go out there because we need to grow, and we need to figure out what's the next level. And he came back to me like 3 months later, saying, David, because you told me that, I had the green light, and I started managing again because I wasn't concerned whether I was going to break something by making decisions that weren't aligned. So it's so important to make sure that your people feel trusted and that they can make those mistakes along the way.
Yeah, yeah,
Such a great
that
point.
they feel valued, and again, just
Mm,
that autonomy, right? I read a book. No, a lot of people probably have at this point by Dan Pink in his book Drive, and talks
mm,
about just allowing people to have autonomy. People
yeah.
desire to want to get good at things, and they want to be left to their own devices to try and figure out how to do it best. And I think when you can incorporate that into a team, it definitely helps.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because when you ask me about the systems and it links exactly to this autonomy, I realized probably the first system that we put in place was clarifying roles and responsibilities, kind of an org chart, but not org chart just for the sake of hierarchy, but really for like, okay, who's going to be in charge of what? And we decided to just frame like those sandboxes, so everybody's owning their sandboxes. So the culture of management is really about honoring people in their sandboxes. They're the best. They live it day in day out. And whenever something arises, we're like, okay, whose sandbox is does this belong to? And sometimes we'll remind ourselves, and that gives a sense of freedom within a sandbox. Like this is my domain, and then we're collaborating. So autonomy is absolutely key. I'm with you 100%.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit. So I did my dissertation work on different job designs, and one of the ones that I had studied, which was really intriguing, holacracy. Have you heard
Mm.
of it?
I've seen one business that was going for it. I don't know how they fared, but yeah, it's a very interesting
It
model.
is an interesting model. Yeah, Zappos is probably the most well-known business
Mm,
that incorporated it. But it's interesting because it works on the basis of having a constitution, kind of a organizational constitution where, the whole idea of it is that, like in society, we kind of have these, kind of cultural norms, right? Is this
mm,
kind of a social contract, right? We're going to drive a car. We're going to stay on the road. We're not going to drive over,
mm,
people's front yards, right? We're, we have rules and we try and obey them. But for the most part, people, are autonomous, right? They make their own decisions while they're
mm.
driving. And so the idea is to have a constitution at work. And then, people have a responsibility to do this role, to do this thing, and just give them the freedom to connect with the people that they need to, bring people into their work circle that they need to, basically own that part of the business. Like that is the thing that you do. And so hearing what you were talking about with sandboxes and just giving people the autonomy and the authority to just kind of own it, that in and of itself really does help people and organizations build.
Yeah, I think it's actually helping even in the happiness factor, really,
Yeah.
because you have a sense of ownership of so the build for freedom. I talk about it in the book, but it's not just freedom for the business owner, the founder, the entrepreneur. It's really the concept that everyone has some sense of ownership of their thing, right? So some sense of freedom in their own little domain. Um, so I strongly believe that that's so important and to foster that, because at the end of the day, that's how people are happy, is to have agency over their universe, especially at work.
Yeah, very much so. Funny you mention that because one of the reasons I did my dissertation work on job designs, it was addressing kind of what makes people happy at work, right? So my
Mm,
whole kind of reason why I pursued my PhD, the whole reason that I went into this kind of industrial psychology thing was because I had this burning question, which was, how do you make people happy at work?
mm,
As a manager and somebody who's, had people and teams, and it's like you have all these people with different attitudes and emotions who come in to work. And, what makes one person love coming in every day and another person just, same job, hate it, and they're just not happy. And so that was kind of the catalyst for me digging into positive psychology and learning about job designs and holacracy. And it was funny because I actually, my work was on whether or not people who worked in a matrixed organization, which is a lot of project managers who work cross-functionally with different teams,
Mm,
if they were any more or less happy than people who worked in a holacracy. And going into it, I thought, well, if
okay.
you worked in a holacracy and you had all this self-determination and you kind of owned processes, that you would be more happy. No, there was no difference between people who worked in a matrix organization or a
Really
holacracy.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and
Interesting.
I figured people who had more control over their destiny might have more of that, but they did have more. They did have more connectedness and more kind of higher levels of achievement, like feeling of
Okay.
achievement. But outside of that, like the overarching feeling of happiness and well being, wasn't it wasn't there. So
You know what's interesting? First I commend you for PhD. I'm a lover of concepts, ideas, reader of books. I don't know that I have the chutzpah to through a full process. So congrats. And these are topics that I love discussing and learning about. But um, one thing what my gut feeling is telling me is that there has to be another angle, which is kind of the fit of a personality versus their role. So even if they have the sandbox and the autonomy, some people will not be comfortable with that. They need more structure versus others, and maybe that's how mobility functions in complexities of roles. But but I've noticed at SOPAC, some people were just not comfortable having a sandbox. They wanted to be able to say, "Hey, it's not working for me, and I need somebody to tell me what to do. And if it doesn't go well, it's too stressful to have this staying power, if you will." And we've gone through evolution, and people would leave the team and it was okay because there was not the right fit. So it's not that that person was not a good worker, it's just it was not the right fit. So I think there has to be something about I'm going to say personalities or preferences versus the culture of the business.
I I understand where you're coming from on that. For me, I think that this is where the coach really becomes valuable because the coach has to
Mm,
instill the confidence, right? There are times, there are people who are afraid to take ownership, and not because they're not good at taking ownership. Something has happened there where, for one reason or another, maybe they got burned, maybe it goes back into something deeper, in their upbringing and
mm,
things like that. But sometimes people are just afraid to take on that ownership. And I think that what we try to do is say, well, where is the best fit for that kind of thing, right? So
mm.
probably never, well, I shouldn't say never, but probably going to be a struggle to move them into leadership roles because that's very much having to be autonomous and having to own and take responsibility for things. But we always need good doers. We always need good taskmasters. And sometimes people
Yep.
are great taskmasters, but they don't want to be a leader. Like they don't mind owning the process, and they will make sure that every dot is dotted and T is crossed. And they're very good at the minutia, but don't want to don't want to be an abstract thinker, don't want to do strategy sessions. So I think it's like
Yeah.
trying to find that right, fit for them.
Yeah, so a matter of fit. That's what I'm hearing is exactly a fit on what's expected, what's hoped for for a specific role, and making sure you there's a right fit for that team member.
Yeah, and,
Yeah,
and
for sure.
to your point, uh, sometimes, especially when I've worked for big organizations, thousands of people. There's a little bit more mobility and things like that. When you're a small
Mm,
business, you mentioned you had an organization, a head count of 20. there's no hiding in a head count of 20. There's no like
Yeah.
every player has to be a strong player. It's a little bit harder, I think, when you have a smaller condensed team like that to have that person find themselves, if you will. Or like, and again, I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, no, you're totally right. It's funny because as we were growing and we had one tech and then we had to hire a second tech, and that first tech had been like the founding tech, documenting everything and whatnot. And we realized that he was not comfortable with that growth because now he had to share knowledge, tools, some of the stuff he had designed or built, if you will, and now he had to share. And I remember that we had come to a realization that he could not operate in a team that where he wouldn't be the tech, and that's it. There's nobody else. And then a second one joins, and the second one is friendly, smart, quick learner. And we realized his fit was small business. He's the go-to guy for everything tech. Don't put him with another one because that wouldn't work. And he ended up leaving us because for him, it wasn't going to work. And we had a choice to make because I really liked the guy, but at the same time, we were growing. So we couldn't just accommodate. And I think some entrepreneurs face that wall. Well, they're attached to their people and then the business is evolving and the fits are evolving as well, and now they have to make these decisions, or and and
Yeah,
and,
that
and that's one of the shift that one has to do with scaling.
that is where it gets tough, especially when you have
Mm.
people who kind of been there from the start. But as the business grows and you're leveling up, there's a need for a bigger skill set there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, David, let me ask you this, because you've built a business up, you've gone through it. You also had some experience prior to getting into what you did that scaled. If you were to start over again today, start something else from scratch, what do you think you would do differently?
That's a great question. Uh, First of all, I had capital when I started because I knew I'd start a business, but I was foolish enough to wait before hiring. So, based on the capital available, I would make sure to right away get some form of structure and help, especially on the sales side of things, to get things going because growth is the first level. So to it's like that lift off. When a plane lifts, that's where it consumes the most energy, or a rocket for that matter. I think it's 70%. So to put all the energy on on growing right off the bat, and if you can hire to just get out there, maybe it's hire somebody who will generate leads for you if you're the top salesperson for your project, but really focus on getting that done first before anything else. Get that idea because if your idea is not good enough or is not something that hits home for enough potential clients, you're gonna need to know fast before you pivot. So I would say it would be all about growth.
Kind of switching gears a little bit toward your book, who do you see as kind of your best audience for who this book is for?
When I wrote the book, I actually had three people in mind. I had what I like to call the entrepreneur. So somebody who's thinking about starting a business, maybe they have a product idea, a service idea, maybe they're really good at something, but now they want to venture on their own. So I thought I want to write it, and I wrote it in a way that it's like a recipe book. So you read this thing, and maybe it's dangerous because I've been told it looks so easy to start a business when you read this, like it's all laid out. So so I'd say the entrepreneur would be the first of my ideal reader, based on the feedback. The second one was, your typical entrepreneur. They have some success. They have some growth. Uh, they're not the business is viable, but now they want more, and they feel trapped. So that would be like really the entrepreneur, maybe 10 to 20 or 5 to 15 team members, but they're kind of doing it all, and they feel like, okay, I've plateaued at this stage. What do I do? So that would be like the second type of reader, I guess. And the third one is what I'd like to call the detrepreneur. So I've seen them a lot in my business groups. So this is your seasoned entrepreneur. He's done it all, but he's still doing quoting. He's still doing the sales pitch. He's still doing all these things, but he's at a point where he's mature and he's made good money, but he's still stuck, and he wants to kind of detach himself from the business. He just doesn't know how. So that would be the entrepreneur, somebody who's already successful, but they're entrenched into their operation. So entrepreneur, the entrepreneur, and the entrepreneur are my top ones.
Nice. So one of the things I always like to make sure that people know is, how do folks find you? I imagine that you're doing some coaching with folks, that you're trying to.
Yeah.
Are you on the speaking circuit? How do people reach out to you? How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, the best way to reach out is go on davidsalerno.com. David Salerno, like my name.com. And then from there, they can connect to, if they want to discover about the packaging business, about the Sherpa, the book, everything. That's really the hub where they can connect. People can write in. Always my pleasure to exchange. And for some reason, people are very connected to LinkedIn. At least the people I connect with, I get found out on LinkedIn a lot. So easiest way is davidsalerno.com or on LinkedIn. Simply.
Nice. Yeah, because, it's interesting. LinkedIn, the two places where we get the most traction for the content that we make, LinkedIn, and then, of course, YouTube. We're putting a lot of focus on YouTube.
Yeah.
So, as a matter of fact, as the recording of this podcast, we've just hit 25,000 subs, which is,
Hey, congratulations.
yeah. So we're a quarter of the way to our 100,000 sub goal. So,
Congratulations. I know it takes a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of persistence to get to where the show got. So congratulations.
yeah, no,
Happy to be part of the adventure.
we're focused on hitting 100K by the end of the year. So that is
That's amazing.
the goal we're going for.
Beautiful,
Well,
beautiful.
David, I appreciate so much your time and sharing your wisdom. We will definitely make sure that we put in our show notes everywhere that we can find you, as well as links
Sure,
to your
thank
book,
you.
because I think that's something that definitely a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs can benefit from. This whole idea of breaking away, finding time, lessen the stress. Running a business it's going to have problems, but it should also be a little fun.
Built for Freedom. This is what the book looks like. Built for Freedom. You see that mousetrap? So you wanna have fun and not just be running like there's no tomorrow. I wish it to every entrepreneur out there.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much again for everything and sharing your wisdom. For everybody listening, thank you all for checking out DissedMedia, a startup story. As mentioned, we're on a road to hit 100,000 subs by the end of 2026. So we would appreciate it if you give us a like, give us a follow. As I always say, tell your friends, more importantly, tell your enemies, because those are the people who will take actions on your words. So
Oh, there you go.
make sure you let your enemies know all about us. And folks, if you're interested in David's book, we're going to have that in the show notes. Also, if you're interested in my book, feel free to pop over to benolmos.com. You can read up on it. First chapter is free, so feel free to download that, and we'll keep you updated on things to come. Thank you all very much for checking out this episode, and we'll talk to you next time. Have a good one.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to DissedMedia, a startup story. This podcast was produced and edited by Ben Olmos and is a production of DissedMedia Corporation. If you're interested in learning more about anything you heard on this episode, please reach out to us at podcast@dissedmedia.com. You can also get more information about this and other episodes, or information about our guests, by checking out dailypitch.news, our business and insights publication focused on helping managers, leaders, and entrepreneurs get better at what they do.